Hello and welcome to the Unlucky Frog Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Porter, and I am joined this Independence Day by Marc Specter of the Grand Gamers Guild. How are we doing, Marc?
Yeah, hey.
You doing good?
I am. It's been a busy, so obviously you guys are offset from me by quite a number of hours, 6 hours about. And so it's still the first half of my day pretty much, and it's been extremely busy.
I can verify that you are a busy man because you do have a few irons in the fire at the moment, as I understand.
Always. There's always multiple projects being juggled. Even the one that's on Kickstarter and the ones that will be on Kickstarter and the ones that have been through Kickstarter.
So what is the one that's on Kickstarter, Marc?
The one that's on Kickstarter right now is called the Artemis Project. It is the story of founding a colony on Europa and the struggle therein. So it's a dice placement, engine building, set collection game. Currently, it was 2 to 4 players. Now it's 2 to 5 players as we unlocked our first stretch goal. And
Nice.
yeah, I love it. Obviously, I wouldn't be publishing it if I didn't love it.
So for those of us that are maybe a wee bit ignorant of things to do with space and such, this is Europa. It's one of Mars's moons. Is that right?
Jupiter, actually.
Jupiter. There we go. I make a big thing about people being ignorant and then I go and do it myself.
That's okay. I'll tell you a funny little anecdote. Is right at the beginning, we had put out some copy, I think it was actually on Board Game Geek, and made the mistake of saying that it was a moon of Saturn. So I promptly caught it and changed it. But it was just really funny that, through all the people who had their hands on it, somehow that mistake had crept into our description. And fortunately, we caught it before anybody else.
That's made me feel a bit better to hear that.
Yep.
So it's an easy mistake to make, but we are talking about the celestial body Europa and not a continent, in
Correct.
case anyone made that mistake.
That is correct.
So I did a quick Google this morning to find out a bit more about the Artemis Project, and continuing the theme of ignorance, I just typed the Artemis Project into Google. And then obviously what first came up was the real life Artemis Project, which was it followed after the Apollo project, and it was the attempt to establish a colony on the moon, right?
Exactly. And the reason why we chose the Artemis Project as a title for founding a colony on Europa is Europa as a planetary body in the solar system is a sheet of ice that has suspected to have an ocean underneath it. It's believed to be one of the places that life has a genuine possibility of flourishing. And the Artemis Project, as you referenced for our moon, actually did some additional work to see about the viability of establishing a colony on Europa. So it's a little bit science and a little bit creative license. And a heck of a board game.
Yeah. So I think when people hear about something like that, they're immediately going to make the association with games like Terraforming Mars, but it's quite a different game from what I understand.
Oh, absolutely. This definitely, Terraforming Mars, as I understand it, because believe it or not, I've only played it once. Terraforming Mars is primarily, a card game and an engine builder. There are cards in this game, but that's not really what is going to drive your experience. This is primarily a dice placement. The dice are your workers mechanic, and combined with what we call the exposure mechanism, which means that, and I often refer to the game as dice displacement, because depending on where you put the dice down, you can be outbid. Lower numbers can actually supersede higher numbers for set collection, and and basically, while they're both set out in the solar system, from a gameplay standpoint, they really couldn't be more different.
Okay, so and I guess right away when you've got dice in, it adds that little element of chaos, that element of unpredictability.
Exactly.
Keep things spicy.
Yep. However, there is a lot of what I'll refer to as dice mitigation. We have a component in the game that we refer to as tools. So tools can be used to elevate or decrease the pips on the die to achieve whatever goal you want to use. Moreover, and I think one of the most unique things about the Artemis Project is that no matter where you put them on the board, the dice are going to interact with other players' dice. So, for instance, if you want to try to collect a resource, let's say you're collecting minerals from the quarry, and you put down a 3 saying that at the end of the round, you intend to claim 3 of the, let's say, 7 minerals that are there in the quarry. Well, if I put a 4 down, my 4 is actually going to come after that 3. But if I put a 2 down, my 2 is going to get placed and collect before your 3. So in as much as dice do cause chaos, you are going to, you're going to roll them all at the beginning of the round. You're going to see what you have, and then you're going to have to choose your best placement, not only based on what you want, but on what the other players have indicated they want, because your dice are pretty much going to interact with theirs no matter where you put them.
Okay, that's pretty smart. That's quite interesting. The bidding war, as it were, with that. Moving on, I guess, to the actual look of the game.
Yeah.
I have not had a chance to play the Artemis Project just yet, but it is a beautiful looking game.
Thank you.
You sent us over some of the print and play files to have a look over, and the artwork is something else. It's quite impressive for an independent project. How did you guys decide to tackle the artwork?
Now, first, let me say that I do not hold you at all at fault for not printing and playing. I am not a print and play kind of guy, and among the spectrum of games, Artemis Project has a lot of extra bits and components. Yeah. So as a craft project, it's pretty labor intensive. So I don't hold it against anyone who hasn't taken the time to print and play. But to your question about the art, that's actually kind of a funny story. So I'm also co-publisher of Endeavor Age of Sail, which is actually fulfilling right now, and will be having its worldwide debut at Essen this year. But I went to Essen last year to sort of be a vendor there for the first time and get the lay of the land before we were there with a product that we had high hopes of making a big impact. I can't imagine anything scarier than attending Essen and never having been there as a vendor and having, what was hopefully a hit product and having the gamers kind of descend on you en masse and not being prepared for that. So I had been there as an attendee, but I'd never been there as a publisher. And I wanted to lay that groundwork for myself physically and mentally, so I knew what we were getting into. Mm-hmm. And I'm in my booth, which is all the way back in Hall 8. I mean, it was the no man's land of Essen. And apropos of nothing, a guy walks up to me and he's holding a game in his hand, Transatlantic. And he says, "Hey, my name is Dominic Mayer, and this is a game I just did. And here's my, he had this nifty little brochure that he handed me. And we chatted a little bit. And in the back of my mind, Josh Capel, my art director and lead developer and graphic designer, he and I had been searching for an artist for a little bit, but kind of coming up dry. Mm-hmm. And then Dominic walks in front of my into my booth and introduces himself, and I knew after flipping through his brochure that he was the guy. But I trust Josh. He's an artist himself, and he knew what we were gunning for. So as soon as I finished my conversation with Dominic, I promptly got on my phone and sent a message to Josh. And I said to him, "I think we found our guy." And I sent him a link to Dominic's online portfolio. And it was a matter of moments for Josh to answer me back and pretty much go, "Oh yeah." So shortly after Essen, we, shot Dominic, what's the word I'm looking for? And a sort of a folio of the art we were looking for. Sure. And, hey, do you have the time? 2, are you interested? 3, can you fit the deadline and everything like that? And yeah, we turned the whole thing around pretty quickly. And he knocks it out of the park. If you follow Dominic on social media, he does these things that he calls speed painting that he posts. And I'm not an artist. My artistic talent stopped when I was about 8 years old. And it has not grown anywhere since. Now, to be fair, I haven't ever cultivated it, but that's another story. My point being is that Dominic does these things that he calls speed painting. So he's going to dash something together and just see how it comes out. And it is just unbelievable. So, yeah, we got really lucky to get an extremely talented guy. And obviously, like you said, you've seen the result, as have many others. So we're absolutely thrilled, to be sure.
Yeah, it's surprising the amount of color that he's been able to incorporate into it, considering it is space. Because I mean, that maybe sounds a bit silly, but it's like, to use terraforming Mars as an example, everything is red or variations of red within that.
Yeah,
But
that's
within
sort
the
of.
Artemis Project, you've got splashes of red, you've got blue. Um, there's the card with the octopoid type creature grabbing the guy.
Yep.
It's
And the jelly swarm card with the bioluminescence, the
yeah,
way Dominic got it to look like there was actually light emanating from a flat card is well, just talent, talent and hard work and dedication and practice and all those other things that go into being, a successful artist.
yeah.
Huge kudos to him.
We'll stick the link to Dominic's social media in the show notes as well for anyone that wants to check
Awesome.
that out, because I want to check that out. And you told me the speed
Fantastic.
painting thing, that sounds really good. So for people that are maybe wondering how you factor into all of this, Mark, you are neither artist nor designer. So do you want to tell us a
Nope.
bit about what you do at the Grand Gamer Guild?
Yeah, so I'm the fool that people call a publisher. I'm the person who functions as essentially as like a general contractor. So in the same way that when a general contractor builds a house, that person is coordinating the carpenters and the roofers and the painters. I, as the publisher, am coordinating the artist and the graphic designer and the designers and the manufacturer, and getting all those things put together into a cohesive whole, so that at the end of 6 months or a year or 2 years, and a Kickstarter campaign in this case, that you end up with an actual game in your hands on your table, beautiful and functional and replayable.
Yeah, so it's actually quite a different skill set, and I suppose that this is where a lot of small independent game designers maybe fall into a bit of trouble, because they don't quite realize, certainly not when they first step into the market, just how much is involved.
Yeah, it's huge. And anyone who, there was a time when you could put a project on Kickstarter and, almost put up a pencil drawing of your dream, and somehow it would resonate and get funded to the nth degree. But it just doesn't happen like that anymore. You pretty much need to come to the table with a fully fleshed out, fully arted up design, mechanically sound, artistically beautiful, and quite frankly, almost ready to rock and roll. I can't speak for any other publishers, but as when we bring a project to Kickstarter, it's pretty much 95% done. And what I mean by that is the mechanics as well as the art. And certainly there are things that get refined, because when you present things to the hive mind of gamers that are Kickstarter enthusiasts, you're going to get a lot of amazing feedback. Some of it's going to be noise that really doesn't jibe with the vision that you have for your game. And some of it's going to be really valuable. And of course, some of it is also going to contribute to the forward movement of the project. And what I mean by that is, and I can't think of a specific example for the Artemis Project in this case, but you may get an idea from a backer or someone who's looked at the project of a new piece of content. And of course, you got to create the art for that content. So, Dominic is still producing, and there are more ideas coming to the table. Obviously, all of them won't get put into the final product, but if we were to simply close that door and not pay attention to what the backers have to say, well, one, that's kind of doing a disservice to the backers. They're there for a reason. But two, you'd be cutting yourself off from a lot of really good ideas. It's kind of just like when you run a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, the GM or the DM who listens to the players is going to get a lot of ideas just listening to them chat out the scenario and what they're thinking.
And it's, at the risk of sounding a bit snooty as well, consumers don't always know what they want, even if they think they do.
That's true.
I mean, we talk to a lot of game designers, but like, even in our capacity as media, you have to decide what feedback is going to be useful to you and what isn't. That can be tough, like you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be, there's a balance you strike between being true to your vision and getting the best product out the door possible. I am not someone who No, let me change how I'm saying this. I surround myself by a team of people who are smarter than me in their fields. I have no problem admitting that I am, usually not the smartest person in the room, but always happy to listen, take the feedback and the information, and then hopefully put out the best product possible.
Well, there's different types of intelligence, isn't there? I mean,
Absolutely.
As trite as that sounds,
no, you're not wrong.
You talk about artists. It's very common in my experience that people with artistic brains, when you start trying to talk to them about money and spreadsheets, it's either a blind spot or they're like, oh, I do not want to hear about that. I'm not interested.
Yeah, I was actually having a conversation with a good artist friend over the weekend who was sort of, I mean, she's very successful, but she was lamenting the fact that a lot of art schools and a lot of art students are woefully unfamiliar with the business angle. And it is to their peril to proceed that way, because it's one thing to pursue your passion. It's, a totally different story if you pursue that passion and also understand the way business needs to work for you to survive.
But it's so true, isn't it? That art schools, they take this almost bohemian attitude to it, and it's like, well, that's nice, but on the other hand, you go to a university, at some point or another they're going to teach you how you can apply what you've learned in a job.
That's the hope.
Yeah. And I mean, my friend, he's just started college. He's studying music, but what the lecturer said to him when he first started is, when you finish this course, you're going to have the requisite skills and experience to become a session musician.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not just teaching him music. And like you say, it's that maybe they should be rolling that out a bit more across the other art schools.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of skills to get where you need to go, especially when you're pursuing an artistic pursuit.
Yeah, personally speaking, it always really annoyed me looking back on my time at school.
Mm-hmm.
They never taught me how to do a tax return at school.
Yeah, education is and obviously we have two different educational systems, where you are and where I am. But I think we're reaching a commonality in saying that there's a lot of basic life skills that don't get taught, that people need to survive.
Yeah, you're like, I don't give a shit about vectors. I want to know how to pay my bills and write checks. So if anyone's listening and they're on an education board, you need to get your finger out. Apparently this is a transatlantic problem, so no matter where you are, you need to get your finger out. There you go. So going back, because we've gone way off topic here, to the Artemis Project, how does your role as to use your word, the contractor, how have you applied that in the process for the Artemis Project specifically?
Sure. So way back in June 2016 was my first time sitting down with Daniel Rocky, one of the co-designers, and in order for me to move forward on a game, I'm sort of the first line of defense. That is to say, I want to make sure that the rest of my team buys into the project, because I don't want anyone being forced to work on anything that they're not passionate for. But I'm the first gatekeeper.
Yeah.
And so we sat down and played, and I had no shame in telling Daniel almost immediately that I was impressed and wanted to take the game to next steps. And so I issue a contract, and he signs that contract, and then we get things rocking and rolling. After that, it was a matter of familiarizing Josh, again, who acts as my lead developer, with the project, and making sure that, and he had already indicated an interest and an enthusiasm for it. So that was part of that step. And then we started pursuing the art and refining the mechanics. And that was, all told, pretty much a 2-year process. Now, fortunately, geographically, Josh and Daniel live actually closer to one another than either of them live to me. So they were able to work both in person and electronically. And of course, the other designer, Daryl Chow, who's in Singapore, he was able to chime in and work on development. And they actually did a ton of work in one of those, one of those sort of project development platforms that I wasn't even aware of. And it wouldn't be correct to say that the game was completely different from the game that I first met back in June of 2016. But when they presented to me the final product of their labors that we were going to put on Kickstarter, there were some pretty significant changes, and they were all to the better. So it was really awesome. But again, that process took about 2 years, and towards the end of that, yeah, probably the last 6 months of that is when we contracted with Dominic to get moving on the actual art.
Uh-huh.
Once we picked a date for the Kickstarter, at that point you start announcing things publicly, and they really start moving. And you try to be as true to things as possible. But one other really kind of funny thing is we'd actually set a date for the Kickstarter of late July and had to bump it by 6 weeks because we realized we'd set an inappropriate deadline. The project was not going to be realized the way we wanted it to. But then we settled on a date, we finalized it, and hey, here we are. We pressed the launch button back. What is less than a week ago? So we're 5 days in, and things are going pretty well.
Yeah. So you talked about how you saw the initial version of the game, and then how different in many ways yet similar it is in its final iteration. In between those two versions of the game, are you quite actively involved in playtesting the game in its various iterations and forms and feedback for that?
In this case, Josh would summarize some of what they had done, and they would bounce it off to me. But no, I was not actively involved in the playtesting and development. He was doing that with Daniel and with Daryl, and getting it to the point where we were going to be sort of ready for public presentation. And that's fine, because believe me, I was definitely not lacking for things to do, trying to keep the business going, maintain sales on our other products like Pocket Ops, which, and again, I might be messing up the actual timeline, but this was all going on while the Pocket Ops Kickstarter was basically over, and we were getting the product out to the world. So I was handling the fulfillment of that, the logistics. I was going to conventions and selling our other products, Stroop and on real estate. So yeah, I don't know, man, that was probably a little more answer than what you expected, but yes, I was taking care of other business things. He was getting the game to the table repeatedly and getting it where it needed to be.
We're always happy to get more answer than we expected, so no need to apologize. So primarily, your concerns are with the business side of things. You're still at the head of the Gamers Guild.
Yeah.
I suppose that although you said in the case of the Artemis Project, that you weren't actively involved in playtesting, and that really there was this consultation process between you and the developers.
Mm-hmm.
With it being your company, there's quite a bit of trust there involved in allowing the guys to just see about their process, because you do hear about some less reputable and some less constructive working environments where the managers it's almost like they're always wresting control back from things that they've delegated to people.
Sure. Well, I'll speak to that. I'm really fortunate. Josh Capel is, again, I hired him. He is an artist, and he came on board as my art director, lead developer. So and he's been my friend for goodness, probably about 4 or 5 years at this point. So we had a pre-established relationship, and trusting him to get the job done correctly and on time really wasn't much of an issue. I mean, obviously, like you said, things could always go awry, but he knew the core of the game. He and I talked, I would say, reasonably extensively. And there's some things that can change in a project, but there are fundamentals that were always going to be in place. And he knew that was the reason that I contracted the game. And I'm sure that he wouldn't be, and again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I'm sure that he wouldn't be afraid to make a change as appropriate. Mm-hmm. But I'm also certain that if he were going to make a change that was fundamental to gameplay, that he and I would have a conversation first.
Yeah.
He keeps me informed with as much as I need to know to keep things going in the right direction.
Yeah. So communication and trust. You heard it here,
Definitely.
Folks. The magic recipe for any company, not just a gaming company. So we've just about reached the end of our time here, but before we go, for people who are interested in the Artemis Project and the Grand Gamers Guild, where should they go?
Sure. So if you're looking for the project itself, you can simply like you did, you can Google the Artemis Project Kickstarter, and that should get you to the page. You can also go to Kickstarter itself and type in there a little search engine, the Artemis Project, and it should come up without a problem. As far as the guild itself, you can find us at grandgamersguild.com. You can find us on Facebook by searching Grand Gamers Guild. And on Twitter and Instagram, we are at Grand Gamers Guild, but no vowels. So our title was a little bit too long, so I had to figure out how to make it work, and so I decided to cut out the vowels.
Decided to put in the Welsh version.
There you go. That's an excellent way of putting it.
So, and I suppose it is also worth saying that you'd mentioned earlier Endeavour is coming out this year.
Yeah, Endeavour Age of Sail is fulfilling to backers now, and it will have its debut at Essen, and it'll be in retail release after that.
There we go. It's all go at the Grand Gamers Guild. Mark, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been a fun conversation.
It certainly has. And for all our listeners, wherever you are, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Good night.
Hi everyone, it's Charlotte from the Unlucky Frog Gaming Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Now be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. All you need to do is search Unlucky Frog Gaming. You can also show your support for the Unlucky Frog through Patreon. To find out more information, check out our website, www.unluckyfrog.com. Thanks, bye!